but it's fine. Right. One sec. Here we go. Okay. That's going live. While we're doing that, let's do this. Right. Can everyone see the slideshow?
Not yet. It just says the sacrifices of childbirth.
Yeah, sorry, that's it. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Right, Iris, we missed you last week.
Hang on a minute.
Oh, we missed me last week as well,
No,
actually.
we didn't do anything
Yeah.
for 2 weeks.
Right, over to you. Yeah.
Okay. The Parsha of Tazria. It went small again. The Parsha of Tazria continues the discussion of the laws of Tumah, the Tahara, ritual impurity and purity. A woman giving birth should undergo a process of purification, which includes immersing in mikveh, a naturally gathered pool of water, and bringing offerings to the holy temple. All male infants are to be circumcised on the 8th day of life. Zarat, often mistranslated as leprosy, is a supranatural plague which can afflict people as well as garments or homes. If white or pink patches appear on a person's skin, dark red or green in garments, a Kohen is summoned. Judging by various signs, such as an increase in size of the afflicted area after a 7-day quarantine, the Kohen pronounces it tamai, impure, or tahor, pure. A person afflicted with zarat must dwell alone outside of the camp or city until he is healed. The afflicted area in a garment or home must be removed. If the zarat recurs, the garment or home must be destroyed.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, so that's Tazria, yes? Okay. It starts off talking about childbirth. Let's talk about childbirth today. Okay, here we go. 1 second. So, source number 1, who'd like to read? I'm going to try to do less talking, get other people to read as much as possible. So, who'd like to read number 1?
I'll read that.
Go on.
When her purification period for a son or a daughter is complete, she shall bring the priest to the communion tent entrance, a yearling sheep for a burnt offering, and a young common dove, or a turtle dove for a sin offering. The priest shall offer the sacrifice before God and atone for the woman, thus cleansing her of the blood coming from her womb. This law applies whether a woman gives birth to a boy or to a girl.
Okay.
But there's a difference in the length of time, isn't there? For a boy
Yeah.
and for a...
Yes, there is. So, hold that thought, because that might come up soon. So, obvious question. If you look, it's actually... Just look at the... Let me look at a Chumash a sec. I want to get this just in a sec. Just give me a moment. Just want to check something. Says she brings a chatas, a sin offering. Very strange. Not a thanksgiving offering, thanks for recovery and for a child, but a burnt offering and a sin offering. What is her sin? On earth is her sin? Right? This is not one of those religions where human sexuality is considered evil, like Catholic priests have to be celibate. Right? What's the very first mitzvah in the Torah? Go forth and multiply, yes?
Yeah.
So what's her sin? So we're going to look at some possible suggestions for that. So why the double period for a girl? So I have seen a suggestion that this, we're going to see in due course, that a lot of this is tied up with a loss and grief and bereavement. That anything that represents a loss of life, we have a purification process. So a Kohen who's touched, anyone actually who's touched a dead body, right? Menstruation represents the loss of potential life, yes? So interestingly, I'm not sure where this is brought, and obviously it's not my field because I'm male, but I think one of the ideas behind what may trigger postnatal, I think they call it postpartum now, depression, is the loss. You've been carrying a baby for 9 months and suddenly you're empty. Now, obviously not empty. This child has come into the world, but they're no longer dependent upon you. So I believe there might be evidence that that loss, the body's loss, although it's a happy loss, right? It's not a miscarriage, it's a happy loss. Nonetheless, suddenly you've been looking after this child for 9 months inside you and suddenly they're gone. So I have seen a suggestion that also represents a loss, and that's why there's this purification process to make up for that vacuum where the life has left the body, although in this case, it's in order to emerge into its own world. So if that is the case, then a girl obviously has potential in her own life to bear children as well. So it's a double loss. It's the loss of the girl and the potential life. I don't know if that's mainstream, but I've heard that before. Anyway, we're going to look at some reasons. It's obviously not a sin offering. I have heard, I think it's meant to be a joke, years ago, that why does she have to bring a sin offering? Because many women, for example, we're not allowed to say husband anymore, will scream at their partner during childbirth, during labor, like, you got me into this and I'll never want to see you again. I'm going to kill you, and scream at them, and don't you come near me, and you're the reason I'm here, and you're cause of all this pain, and all these things they don't mean. I think that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I don't think that's a real reason, although I've heard quite a lot of noise in delivery suites. So what's the sin? It's a mitzvah to go forth and multiply. So let's look at a couple of answers. There's about 5. So I guess if different people do a different page. So who'd like to read the first 2?
I'll read them.
Go on.
Rabbeinu Bachaya and Kli Yakar both suggest that the offerings recall the sin of Eve in Eden and her punishment from God, that I will make your pain in childbearing very severe. With pain you will give birth to children. Even Ezra followed a suggestion in the Talmud, says that the woman during the anguish of labor may have thought of or expressed ideas that were sinful or that she now regrets, such as vowing not to have future relations with her husband.
There we go. I didn't read the sources closely enough. That's basically what I just said. There we go. So it does have a basis. Okay, so just to summarize, number 1 is because we're told right at the beginning of the Chumash that childbirth will be painful and severe as a punishment for the sin of eating from the apple, from the tree. So therefore, this is corresponding to that idea, which is interesting because there's no mention of sin in conjunction with childbirth. Right? Number 2, that she may have had unhealthy thoughts or toxic thoughts or sinful thoughts. Okay, let's see the next 2. Who wants to read the next 2? Anyone?
Do you want me to carry on?
Go on, do you want to carry on then? Yeah.
Okay. Now, Maimonides says that the sacrifices are a kind of ransom or relief offering for having survived the dangers of childbirth, as well as a form of prayer for a full recovery.
Yeah, the only problem with that is there are different types of offering, and this is not the type of offering that's brought typically as a thanksgiving. It's the type of offering that's brought as a sin offering. But okay, number 4.
The Forno says that the woman has been intensely focused on the physical process accompanying childbirth. She needs both time and the bringing of an offering to rededicate her thoughts to Hashem and matters of the spirit.
Okay, nice. Again, the Chumash actually mentions chatas, which is a sin offering. So that's a bit of a departure from the text, but okay. And final one, number 5.
Rabbi Meir Simcha of Davinsk said that the burnt offering is like an olat ra'iyah, an offering bought when appearing at the temple on festivals, following the injunction, do not appear before me empty-handed.
Okay.
The woman celebrates her ability to appear before Hashem at the temple.
Okay.
But she wouldn't be empty-handed because she would have the baby.
Right. Well, she didn't have an offering, I suppose. So the first 2 are more in line with what we were saying, the sin aspect of it. The last 3 are all very kind of spiritual, very nice ideas. You bring a thanksgiving, or you need time to rededicate thoughts to God, having been focused on childbirth, or that it's that you don't want to appear empty-handed before God in the temple. I'm not sure that personally that I would see that in the text, but okay. Let's see what Rabbi Sachs has to say. So let's talk for a moment about what we call Tumah and Tahara. Tumah being impurity, well, that's what we normally translate it as, and tahara being purity. And of course, the word tahara, most of us know from when someone's died and we go and do a tahara, we cleanse. So the translations are normally unclean or clean, or defiled and versus impure versus pure. These are difficult translations. It's like many things. Direct translation into English is a little bit too definitive. Tameh certainly means that you're in a technical state where you cannot enter a place of holiness, whereas tahor means that you are in a state where you can enter a place of holiness. You know, if somebody turned up, bar mitzvah boy turned up for his bar mitzvah and he had a big stain on his shirt and his mum said, you can't go into shul like that. You've got to clean your shirt, right? Hopefully she wouldn't say, you filthy little so-and-so, right? Even though he's dirty, right? You'd say, you know, you need to look menschlich. You need to be in the right frame of mind to be in shul. So maybe Tumah Tahara is a little bit better understood like that. It's not that Tumah is dirty and unclean. And I saw the most, you know, I saw the most horrific thing, and I'll just share it. It was saying that, unfortunately, one of the hostages who had been released was from Hamas, was saying that they'd been presumably raped, they'd been sexually abused. And they said that I don't know if anyone saw this, I don't remember where it was printed, that their attacker kept asking them if it was their period. Obviously, because in Islam, you're not supposed to have relations with someone who's menstruating. So it's okay to rape captives, but not if they're currently bleeding. Like, that's great. That's, you know, it's a bit like the story of the drug dealers that, you know, were quite happy to sell large amounts of drugs that would kill children, but they were Shomer Shabbos. So, you know, they shut up shop 15 minutes before candle lighting. It just seems a bit ironic. But it's a huge thing. More, I think, in Islam even. I remember they had when I was a chaplain at a university once, they had a mosque, a room that was set aside as a mosque. And evidently one of the issues was that a woman it was her time of the month, wasn't supposed to enter the mosque. So they wanted to ask the cleaners about their monthly cycles, which obviously probably is against human rights law and quality law and who knows what else, right? There's a lot of talk about this nowadays, actually, about menopause and things like that. So in Judaism, yes, there is definitely an aspect to it. A man is not supposed to have relations with a woman who is menstruating. So clearly there is something innately, however we want to express it, not pure or clean in the spiritual sense, but it's not. Defiled sounds awful. Unclean sounds pretty awful as well. So I think we like to define it more as a state that requires a correction. As we may have often said before in these shurim, a lot of things that make a person tameh is an encounter with loss of life or death or potential life. So it's not, look, in some ways, a dead body is extremely holy. That person has died, their soul has left the body, we treat it with the utmost respect, right? We wash our hands before and after we handle it, right? We treat it with enormous respect, right? In another sense, it represents a loss of life. So on the one hand, it's something very spiritual. On the other hand, we need to do something to compensate. So Tum and Tahara often are focused on that. So it could be the reason is to do with her losing the child from inside her, whatever the reason is, she's in a state of Tumah, so she's going to be bleeding. But the English translation is a little bit too harsh. It'd be nice to find a better word in English, but I'm not sure there is one. So what's going on here? We've got the Mishkan and later on the Beit HaMikdash, which represents a symbol of God's presence in our world, right? It's right in the heart of the camp in the wilderness. It's right in the center of Yerushalayim. But of course, it's only a symbol, right? God is everywhere. God is above time and space. So how would we explain having a temple or even a shul, a place of holiness, a place of sanctuary, a place where we have different rules, right? You know, whether that's a man would cover his head or a woman might put a hat on when they go into shul nowadays, right? People have certain respect for a shul, right? People might say, you know, They might feel strange about going to just like if there's a shul that maybe has their shul board meeting in the main shul, people might feel very strange about that. Or going to a concert in a shul, right? Usually you close the curtains or whatever, but there is a certain awareness, right? Somebody perhaps told an off-color joke or used bad language, someone might say you shouldn't speak like that in shul, right? They wouldn't necessarily say you shouldn't speak like that at all. They might. So we have this concept that a certain space is a safe, sacred space, whether it's the temple or the mishkan or a shul, right? Or a place for the Sefer Torah that we treat with respect. Or yes, a mace. We're not supposed to just talk. Right? If anyone's ever done Tahara, if anyone's ever done Shmira, where you sit and you say Tehillim, you're not supposed to chat in the presence of a deceased person. It's considered disrespectful just to be chatting away. So, on the one hand, God is everywhere. On the other hand, we have these places that are holy places. So, what's the answer? So, the answer is God doesn't need a temple or a shul or a holy ark or a place of serenity because God is everywhere. But we need places where we feel God because we get caught up in our everyday lives. So it's not that the temple becomes the only place that you can experience God in Judaism. It's a place where you can go to experience God in a physical building that's geared up for that, free of the distractions of what's going on around you. It doesn't mean that he doesn't exist outside of that, which would be a terrible mistake for people to make. So God is eternal, he's spiritual, we are physical, right? We are born, we grow, we decline, and we eventually die. And interestingly, Rabbi Sachs suggests that if you look, what are the things that are excluded from the temple or from the Mishkan? What are the things that have no place there? It's actually all those aspects, right? A person with a physical impediment is not supposed to serve. Why? Why are we disability discrimination? A woman who's just given birth is tamei. Person who's encountered death is tamei. What do all these things have in common? What they all have in common is they're all human things. So how can we stand in the presence of God's infinity and eternity if we are hampered by our humanity? Not humanity, our mortality. So what are the things that stop us from going to these places to experience God? It's things that remind us of our mortality. So believe it or not, right, when people talk about mortality, they often talk about death. But actually, birth is also a reminder of mortality. Because from the moment you're born, it's a countdown to the day you die. Right? It's a happy one. So even birth. So maybe that's why when we have a birth, although a birth is obviously very different from a death, it's all the same thing. It's all a human limitation. It all reminds us of our human limitations. And therefore, when we go into a place of holiness, which is a place without limitation, we need to do something to purify, to undergo change, to affirm life. Okay, if we look at other reasons that we become impure, that makes sense. What are the things that cause tumah, this skin disease, this tsaras or leprosy, as they sometimes call it? Right? Yes, menstruation. A priest, we said, with a physical blemish. Why? What's wrong with that? Because it reminds us of our human limitations. The woman who's just given birth is not tamei because of the sin of Eve, but because birth also is a sign of mortality. And the temple is a place that is immortal. So this is Rabbi Sachs' idea. I've not come across this before. I think it's a very interesting idea. So basically, the temple is an extraordinary place, and therefore anything that's too ordinary doesn't have a place there. It needs a correction, needs a adjustment. Anything that reminds us of our mortality, because that's ordinary, that's a human limitation. Like God is above time and space, we are very much limited by time and space. So that's one idea. Now, what about the burnt offering then? So why do we bring an oila, which is usually brought on a Yom Tov or Rosh Chodesh? Why do we bring this burnt offering?
Sorry, can I just ask?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the psoriasis that people get today,
Yeah, I
Is
don't
that
think I don't think so.
is that the same?
I don't think so. I don't think so. The leprosy does exist, I think, in India and other places now on the Asian subcontinent.
Was it leprosy or was it
And
a
it
form of
wasn't exactly
psoriasis?
leprosy, because leprosy is a physical disease, and tsaras, if we look, was a spiritual malady brought about by things like we're told Lashon Hara and things like that, but it was a physical manifestation. And by the way,
Well, it's the same as psoriasis nowadays.
No, I
If you
don't
have
think so.
psoriasis,
And it
it's
even
because your
sounds,
skin
it sounds,
is stressed.
no, and it sounds the same, right? Psoriasis and psoriasis.
Hmm.
I don't think it is. I think leprosy exists in certain continents. It's extremely contagious. It's very different from psoriasis nowadays. Is just, I mean, or eczema. No one's suggesting that these are these maladies. Just by the way, it's not the topic for now, but let's just talk about it for a minute. I'm sure we all have different understandings of mental health. We probably have much better understanding than we had, 30, 40 years ago. But still, we often find that mental health is tied to environmental factors, right? Person who's gone through a bereavement is more likely to have some kind of episode or breakdown. Person who's lost their job, person who's being bullied, a person who's encountering stress, person who has worries about their health or their family, right? Or, post-traumatic stress from war and things like that. So people say, I don't understand. You keep telling us that mental health is, is not just in the mind. It's chemical changes. It's like treat it like a physical condition. And yet there are so many factors that are psychological. But the truth is you have that with physical illness as well, right? There are people that get physically ill. Yeah, you get a headache from stress. Yeah, or people who, waste away because they have nothing to live for. So people do get physical symptoms as well from life events. There is a Rebbe called the Kaliva Rebbe that he never had children. I think Mengele did some experiments on him. And as a result of whatever Mengele did, his facial hair never grew. So he looked like a child. He had like most Hasidic Rebbes not clean shaven. Had like a baby face. I think he died. I'm not sure he's still alive. But the effect, I don't know if it was the effect of something that was done with his hormones, but I do know of someone else who I think was a survivor, had a similar experience that their facial hair never grew, and they said it was from shock. So it was a physical response to shock. So there can be all kinds of physiological responses to different things. So I think we understand that more nowadays, right? Anxiety. Someone having a panic attack looks awfully real. It looks like a heart attack, right? I can't breathe. I'm gasping. But what is it? Is it physical or is it spiritual? It's clearly not just mental. It's clearly physical manifestation. So I don't know if in the, hundreds of years ago, people understood physical manifestations of other types of illness, but nowadays we certainly understand that. So we understand Saras as a physical manifestation of something which is much deeper than just a physical illness. It comes from a lack of spiritual completeness that comes from speaking Lashon Hara or other things. I don't know if leprosy nowadays is the same thing. Again, it's a bad translation. It's like a bris is not a circumcision. The circumcision is a physical operation that removes the foreskin. A bris is a circumcision plus various ritual parts which make it a Jewish bris. When a male does a non-Jewish circumcision, it's slightly different. Anyway, so but I don't think leprosy nowadays is the same. I don't think so. Don't think so. I'm trying to think. You used to hear about leper colonies. I don't know if they exist anymore. I think it was India, right? India?
Africa, I thought as well.
Africa?
Mm.
Don't know.
There was a leper colony outside Greece. One of the Greek islands was a leper colony.
Here we go. Spinalonga.
That's it.
There was a
That
king,
would right.
the leper king of Jerusalem.
Mm.
King Baldwin IV. Myth. Interesting. Lots to see on Google. 1 second. To see leper colony.
On your pension.
Yeah, well, we kind of had this during COVID, right? Everyone had to stay away from other people and people had to go into isolation.
This is people took over.
They exist around the world in tropical areas, Philippines and India. In England, in the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries, 11th to 14th centuries, they had religious houses and hospitals for caring for lepers. Okay, and a handful in the United States. Seems like it was a long time ago, then. It still exists today, according to World Health, WHO. There's about 200,000 people with leprosy, called Hansen's disease, mainly in Asia and Africa. Okay. It originated in the Near East. Yeah, the Middle East. Okay, that makes sense. Anyway, there we go. Right, back to this. So that's one idea. This idea that it's not that there's something inherently
How much tax we pay.
dirty or filthy or unclean or, defiling about giving birth or bleeding or encountering death or having various kinds of discharge. It's just that these things remind you of your humanity and your human limitation, which is at odds with the whole idea. Look, it's like, why do we fast on Yom Kippur, right? Because on Yom Kippur, we're like angels. Angels are not bound by need to eat and drink. So we once a year say we're going to forego human pleasure, right? You're not supposed to have marital relations on Yom Kippur either, right? I mean, you have to sleep. We can't manage without sleep. But we give up a lot of our normal human creature comforts. Why? Because to achieve a heightened spiritual level for one day, we give up our human limitations, which is interesting because every other Yom Tov we do the opposite, right? We have meals and we drink wine and we're supposed to do that. But there is this idea that sometimes we need a sanctuary from this world. So things that remind us of our very mortality are at odds with immortality and eternity. That's one idea. Now, what about this burnt offering? So, we learned about the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, right? And one of the things I think we learned, again, was Rabbi Sachs, was this idea that the Akedah was actually a kind of counterculture kind of act that was saying, we do not sacrifice our children because it's not your child. And if you recall, we talked about this, that when Avram realizes he doesn't say who you love anymore, not because he doesn't love you at all, but he realizes that really it's not his place. He's not his child, he's God's child. Right? But in Judaism, the understanding was completely different. In other cultures, they'd say, it's not your child, give your child to the gods. Judaism says, it's not your child, he's on loan to you from Hashem, therefore you have to look after him. He's not your property. You don't have the right of life or death over your child. Your child belongs to God, he's a gift to you. And what did they do after the Akedah? They brought a burnt offering, right? Let's have a look. Who'd like to read number 4?
I'll read.
Tom?
When Abraham looked up, his eyes fell upon a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering in the place of his son.
Right? Okay. So, again, why was an offering done then? So we said a lot of the symbolism of the Akedah was the idea that it's not for you to sacrifice your son because he's not your son. You can't do what you want with him. You have to look after him, basically. Interesting one. So maybe when a woman gives birth, she has to bring a burnt offering as a reminder of the paradigm of the Akedah, which teaches us that we do not subscribe to child sacrifice and that our children are gifts from God and they have to be looked after and treated as such. Let's have a look at an interesting source in the beginning of Bereshis. What happens if you treat your child as your personal possession to do what you want with? The answer is it ends badly. I think we'd say in modern terms, that'd be the kind of parent who says, you have to do this and you have to do that, and you must do this and you must go to this university and you must become this and you must do that and you can't do this, and dominates the child's life because you're my child, you'll do what I say, I can raise you how I want, versus the parent who sees it as a privilege to be charged with this child of God and to give them the best upbringing they can while still recognizing that you're looking after a gift. Let's see what happens with Cain and Abel. Now I'm just going to read this because I want to look at the Hebrew. So it says, the man, the human, Adam, knew his wife, Eve, and she conceived, and she gave birth to Cain. Now, Cain's name in Hebrew is Cain. Anyone know what that means?
Acquired.
Thank you. Yes. When you get married, you lift up a handkerchief. It's a kinyan. When you sell your chometz, you lift something up. It's a kinyan. Poneh means to buy or acquire. Okay? In modern Hebrew, I want to buy pizza. and he koneh pizza and buying pizza. What did she say? Vatomer, she said, Kanisi ish es Hashem. I have acquired a child with the help of God. Is this the right attitude to have? Well, at least she thanked God. But the answer is, not really, no. Because what she should say is, I've been given a child. He's not mine to do what I want with. Question. Did it end well with Cain? Well, no, not really. He killed his brother. He murdered his brother. So there is a suggestion that when you treat your child as just a possession that you have the right to, then there's a good chance your child will turn out very badly, as happened with Cain.
No.
Interesting. No? Interesting idea. I've not seen that before. Now, right? Why the binding of Isaac? What was miraculous about Isaac's birth? Right? The Torah says, who would like to read number 6, who hasn't read yet?
But I'll read again. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah has stopped being in the way of women.
Right. The reason I translated that is because the Torah uses a wonderful euphemism. Right. The Torah says, Avram and Sarah Zakanim, they were elderly. Ba'im bayamim, they were advanced in days. Chadal, they had ceased. Liot, to be, Sarah to Sarah, what? Orach means the way, kanashim, of women. So she no longer had the way of women. So she was basically post-menopause. She'd stopped having a period. She wasn't... I don't think anyone would use that phrase nowadays. They might say time of the month, but here's a nice biblical euphemism. She no longer had the way of women, a euphemistic. So they could not fail to see Yitzchak as anything other than a miracle. Because in the natural order of things, she couldn't have a child. Right? And we find this especially with firstborn children. The 10th plague, right? The firstborn would have been the priest in the service of God, and they all perished in the plague. Right? It's only after the sin of the golden calf, of course, that the firstborn lost that, and that's why we do Pidyon Haben. Hannah dedicated her child Samuel to God. She said, if I have a child, he'll be dedicated to God. So did Samson's mother. So a mother brings a burnt offering in lieu of a child, just like Abram's, saying, I am grateful to be the guardian of this child. And I'm saying to God, really, I should dedicate my child entirely to you. Please accept this offering in its place. So it's a humbling thing. So that's just an idea behind the burnt offering. It goes back to Akedah, and the Akedah is the ultimate expression of the idea. The child is not yours. The child is a gift from God. And you're just thankful. And you offer thanks, and you acknowledge that you're entrusted with this child. So when a woman gives birth, maybe that's why she brings a burnt offering, this Ola, because she's saying... It's almost a thanksgiving. It dates back to Akedah. It's a recognition of whose child it really is. Okay, what about the sin offering? So let's have a look at an interesting piece of the Talmud. Who'd like to read? Who hasn't read yet? Have you read yet?
I haven't read yet.
Yeah.
When the Holy One, blessed be He, came to create man, He created a group of ministering angels and asked them, do you agree that we should make man in our image? They replied, Sovereign of the universe, what will be his deeds? God showed them the history of humankind. The angels replied, what is man that you are mindful of him?
Right, by the way, that's what we say in Yizkor. Ma Adam Ateda Ehu, right? It's about this mortality. Sorry, carry on, yeah.
Okay. Let man not be created. God destroyed the angels. He created a second group and asked them the same question, and they gave the same answer. God destroyed them. Is there any more?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
He created a third group of angels, and they replied, Sovereign of the universe, the first and second group of angels told you not to create man, and it did not avail them. You did not listen. What then can we say but this? The universe is yours. Do with it as you wish. And God created man. But when it came to the generation of the flood, and then to the generation of those who built the Tower of Babel, the angels said to God, were not the first angels right? See how great is the corruption of mankind. And God replied, even to old age I will not change, and even to grey hair I will still be patient.
Yes. So I think, by the way, this is one of the ideas behind the bracha we say about shelo sani aved, shelo sani isha, etc. in the morning. This passage, basically, they're saying, you know, creating man is a bad idea. You know, all man does is he's just going to sin. What will be his deeds? You know, he's going to sin. But nonetheless, God created us anyway. So if he's going to create us, we should do as many mitzvahs as we can. So with
Why
that,
did God bother to ask them in the first place if
so that
he
we can have
wasn't going to
this,
listen?
well, for a bit, I think for a bit of philosophy, so we can have this discussion in the future, basically.
Oh.
No, I'm serious.
Maybe you should have listened to them.
Right. So the angels didn't want to create man. Why? Because they knew that basically we're going to sin, we're going to damage the fragile harmony of the universe. And God said, you know, I know they're going to sin, but I'm going to create them anyway.
Maybe you should have just created womankind.
Would have been much better.
There is a suggestion. You know the story, right? God created Eve and she was very lonely. So he said, you know what? I'm going to create a partner for you. And because he comes from woman, we'll call him man. But he says, do me a favor. He's going to have a very fragile ego. So just make believe that he was created first.
I heard that one.
Okay. So the angel said, no, how can you create man when he's going to sin? God said, no, you know what? It's fine. So therefore, right, we say this even in Koheles, King Solomon. We say this every Leviah. Adam ein tzadik ba'aretz asher ya'aseh tov v'lo yechet. There's no man on earth who does only good and never sins. So according to this, once you're born, it's downhill from there because you're going to sin. So there is a suggestion, I think that Gemara continues to say, that the sin offering is for the future things that this child's going to do because we all make mistakes. So mother brings a sin offering to say, God, you knew humans would sin, you still created them, and you still told us to bring new lives into the world. So accept this offering in advance as paying it forward any wrong my child may do. Well, interesting idea. Parents are responsible in halakha for the sins of their children until bar or bat mitzvah, right? That's why at the bar or bat mitzvah we make a bracha, say, Baruch shepatrani me'oncha halazu. We thank God that from now on I'm no longer responsible for this kid's mistakes, right? So let's see what Rabbi Sachs has to say in conclusion. Who'd like to read? Julian, are you there? You're always good at Rabbi Sachs.
I don't think Julian's there.
Julian's not there.
Oh, no, isn't.
Oh, right. Okay.
Sorry.
Iris, back to you, I think. Go on.
Thus, the sacrifices a woman brings on the birth of a child and the period during which she is unable to enter the temple have nothing to do with any sin she may have committed or any defilement she may have undergone. They are rather to do with the basic fact of human mortality, together with the responsibility a parent undertakes for the conduct of a child, and an acknowledgement that every new life is the gift of God.
I found this quite fascinating, different perspective. So this whole Tum and Tara and all the things that she does in the Tazria when she goes through childbirth and all these general sources, we looked at these 3 points. That number one, it's the idea of human mortality, which includes being born and dying and everything in between. Number two, it's the idea that a parent has responsibility for a child. So therefore, when the child's born, you might say, I hope this child's going to have a good life. And Hashem, I want to offer you, payment on account in case they make any mistakes. And the third thing is to recognize the child as a gift from God, which we said goes back to the Akedah, and the recognition that Yitzchak was a miracle baby. And at the same time, the idea that it's not your child to sacrifice. So a few interesting ideas. It's a bit different from how it's usually learned. But that's
Is that the prayer that you say after childbirth?
The prayer after childbirth is Hagomah, that you say thank you for releasing from danger. That's the danger inherent in. The truth is, you do it after after a big operation as well, because there's always danger inherent, right? I mean, childbirth is far less risky than it used to be. Loads of women used to die in childbirth, right? That was not uncommon at all. So it's far less risky, but it still carries risks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of pain by all accounts.
I can guarantee it is a lot of pain.
So a question I once saw, obviously, if you have to have a C-section, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a medical procedure. But in America, they always talk about being too posh to push, and people book C-sections so they can get back to work a certain day to, you know, whatever. So it's an interesting question I have seen philosophically, which is not for me as a man to ask, is are you allowed to alleviate the pain of childbirth, or is that going against the Torah? So there you go. I'll leave that one for the women to answer, because anything I say, I'll get in trouble.
No, but the C-section nowadays is much more common than it used to be.
And also the recovery period is longer, so it actually doesn't make sense.
It's different
I
recovery.
think it's more that people have a fear of basically of contractions or whatever. No, I mean, obviously that's nonsense. Otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed to take painkillers, right? No one says, I've never heard anyone say you have to experience the pain of childbirth. You can't take painkillers. You can't take pain relief. You can't, ... Right, that was a bit tongue in cheek. Okay, right. I think that's a good
The
place.
people
to
go
stop.
back for more.
That's
Can't be that bad.
So, okay, that's a good place to stop. Nice to see a full house. Oh, Mordechai's here. Sorry, I didn't spot you. Hi, good to see you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, have a good week, everyone.
Thank you.
I'll see you
Dave,
tonight, Debbie.
I'll
Dave,
see you
And
tonight.
Dan and Iris.
Night, Brenda.
sorry,
See you
date for your,
later.
yeah, reminder about tonight, Blima's cast. Also, date for your diary. Week Tuesday, 16th of April, we'll be doing our at-home series at the Saltmans. Thank you, Debbie.
16th.
On Pesach. So that's 16th of April, week Tuesday. Okay, I don't know what the topic will be, but something Pesach related.
Yes.
Right.
You know whose home is going to be, or is it going to be in Sean?
Right. Saltmans.
Yours
At the
Yeah.
Saltmans.
at the Saltzman.
Yeah, sorry, I did say that. Yeah.
Okay. Lovely.
Right. Okay, everyone. Have
Yeah.
a good week.
Night.
Good week.
So,
Bye.
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 Bye.